session of this scary story of the monkey's paw. Today we are going to continue. We are going to continue with chapter 6 and chapter 7. Here we go. Chapter 6. 3 days later, in the big new cemetery 2 miles from their house, the 2 old people said goodbye to their dead son. Then they went back to their dark old house. They did not want to live without Herbert, but they waited for something good to happen, something to help them. The days went by very slowly. Sometimes they did not talk because there was nothing to say without Herbert, and so the days felt very long. Then, one night, about a week later, Mrs. White got out of bed because she could not sleep. She sat by the window and she watched and waited for her son. He did not come, and she began to cry quietly. In the dark, her husband heard her and he called, "Come back to bed. It's cold out there." "It's colder for my son," his wife answered. "He's out there in the cold cemetery." Mrs. White did not go back to bed, but Mr. White was old and tired, and the bed was warm. So in the end, he went to sleep again. Suddenly, he heard a cry from his wife. "The paw!" she cried. "The monkey's paw!" She came back to the bed and stood there. "What is it? What's the matter?" Mr. White cried. He sat up in bed. "What's the matter?" he thought. Why is she excited? What's she talking about? He looked at his wife. Her face was white in the dark. "I want it," she said quietly. "And you got it. Give it to me, please." "What?" Mr. White asked. "The monkey's paw," Mrs. White said. "Where is it?" "It's downstairs," Mr. White answered. "Why?" Mrs. White began to laugh and cry. "We can have 2 more wishes," she cried. "We had 1, but there are 2 more." "Oh no, not again. Think, woman," Mr. White cried. But Mrs. White did not listen. "Quickly," she said, "go and get the paw. We're going to wish for a boy to come back to us." "No," Mr. White cried. "You're mad." Get it quickly," Mrs. White cried again. Mr. White said again, "Think, woman, think. Our boy was in the machinery for a long time. They didn't want to show him to us. Think. Do you want to see his body?" "Yes, he's my son. I'm not afraid of him," she answered. "You don't understand," Mr. White said sadly. But he went downstairs to look for the monkey's paw. In the living room, it was dark, and Mr. White did not have a candle. Slowly, he went across the room and he put out his hand for the monkey's paw. He touched it and quickly took his hand away again. "No," he thought, "I can't. I don't want to see Herbert, his face, after he was in the machinery. No." Then he thought about his wife, and he put out his hand and took the paw. In the bedroom, his wife waited. She saw the paw in Mr. White's hand and cried, "Quick, make the wish." I can't, Mr. White answered. Remember, he died in the machinery. Make the wish. I'm not afraid of my own son, Mrs. White cried again. Mr. White looked sadly at his wife, but he took the paw in his right hand and said slowly, I wish for my son Herbert to come back to us. Then he sat down in the nearest chair, but Mrs. White went over to the window and looked out into the road. She stayed there for a long time and she did not move. Nothing happened. The monkey's paw could not do it. Thank God, Mr. White said, and he went back to bed. Soon, Mrs. White went to bed too. Chapter 7. But they did not sleep. They waited and they listened. In the end, Mr. White got up to get a candle because the dark made him more afraid. He began to go downstairs, but suddenly he heard a noise at the front door. He stopped and he listened. He could not move. Then the noise came again. This time he ran. He ran upstairs back into the bedroom and he closed the door behind him. But again the noise came. What is that? Mrs. White cried, and she sat up in bed. Nothing. Go to sleep again, her husband answered. But Mrs. White listened and the noise came again. It's Herbert! It's Herbert! She cried. I'm going to open the door for him. And she got out of bed and ran to the door of the bedroom. Mr. White got there first and stopped her. No, he cried. Think! But it's my boy. It's Herbert, she answered. No, don't go, don't. Her husband cried again, but Mrs. White did not listen to him. She opened the bedroom door and ran from the room. I'm coming, Herbert, I'm coming, she called. Mr. White ran after her. Stop, he cried. Remember, Herbert died in the machinery. You don't want to see him. For a minute, Mrs. White stopped and looked at her husband. But then the noise came again and she began to run downstairs. Help me, she called to her husband. But Mr. White did not move. The paw, he thought. Where's the monkey paw? He ran back into the bedroom. Quick, he thought. Where is it? At first, he could not find it in the dark. There it was. He had it. Just at that minute, he heard his wife downstairs. Wait, Herbert, I'm coming, she cried. She began to open the front door. At the same time, Mr. White took the monkey's paw in his right hand and he made his third wish. Mrs. White gave a long and happy cry and her husband ran down to her. She stood by the open door, very afraid. Old Mr. White looked out into the dark. The road was dark and quiet, and there was nobody there. And that, my friends, is the end of this fantastic story of The Monkey's Paw. Thank you very much for being here, listening this fantastic scary story. In the meantime, have a beautiful, but most of all, scary Monday. Bye bye.